way that Wobbles has been playing, you know, I don't know. I think this might be Wobbles' game.
Yo,
wow.
there it was again. Oh my God, from Wobbles.
Hello everyone, my name's Soda, and I'm here to talk about this painting you can see behind me. And today I'm joined with the subject of the painting, Panda Global's own Robert Wobbles Wright. And you can hear me fine, and everything's all set?
Yep, I'm good.
Perfect, thank you. And so just to give you a quick rundown of the painting, the title of the painting is Home Field Advantage. It's oil on canvas, it's 36 by 26 inches, and the image was created by recreating a moment using tasks on my computer, pausing the game, and rotating the perspective so I could get the proper composition. And so, Wobbles, I reached out to you on Twitter when the painting was not even half done, and you were actually able to recognize yourself in the painting. Could you tell the viewers the details, including when, where, and who this was against?
Okay, so the tourney was Battle of the Five Gods. It was a 16-player invitational in Austin, Texas, and just 16 of the best Melee players. I got invited because Leffen, a Swedish player, wasn't able to go because he was having visa issues, so I wasn't even in the original group. This happened in the third phase of the tourney. There was a group phase, then a second pool to qualify for the final bracket. I made it into the bracket, and then this was the losers quarterfinals match, and it was me versus a player named Westballz Dennis. So this happens at the end of game one. I managed to land a pretty fancy setup into a grab, and then I finish in style.
Yes, I would definitely say so.
This is a nice freeze frame in that moment.
Yes, thank you very much. And so Battle of the Five Gods is it's a tournament that you kind of exceeded the expectations from the community in regards of your final placing. And that final placing was 4th. Going into the event, did you expect to place that high, and were you surprised by your results?
Well, I generally don't try and think about my placing all that much. I remember when I first moved out to Arizona, when I was still kind of becoming a competitive smasher, and I was playing with all the different players out there, and we all noticed something kind of weird, which is I had close games with everyone. It's like their worst players and their better players. I pretty much had the exact same kind of margins of victory and defeat. And that's sort of held true through a lot of my career, where my highs are high and my lows are low. I can beat anyone on a given day, and it feels like I can kind of lose to anyone on a given day. And this might be a function of my style or inconsistency or character or what have you, but it means that I just try not to think too hard about what placing I'm going to get and just take every match just one game at a time. Because if you go in saying, oh, I hope I get 3rd, I hope I get 5th, well, you might just get lucky with your bracket. You might play people you're good against, or you might just get stacked up against the best player early on, place kind of low, and then go, oh, I didn't meet my goal. But what if that was a person you might have played in the grand finals, right? So your 9th could easily have been a 2nd, right? I try not to think about the placing. I know I did beat a lot of good players there, but with the exception of one guy, Plup, who's another Panda Global player, I didn't actually beat anyone that I hadn't beaten before. I've certainly never beaten them all in a row at one tournament, but yeah, it was pretty impressive for me from an energy standpoint. I usually tire out over the course of a 3-day event with that much intensity. All the sets were 3 out of 5. But I did play well, and yeah, it was nice. I wouldn't say it surprised me in as much as I knew I could beat everyone that I played, but it was exhilarating to actually pull it off.
Yeah, I can only imagine how that was to play so many high-level games in a row. And so actually, just I wanted to throw this little stat at you. During my research, I realized that you became the first player ever to play all 5 gods in one single event at Battle of the 5 Gods,
Yep.
which is interesting enough. You ended up beating 2 of them, which was PPMD and Mewtwo King, who you had both beaten before, and you ended up going 2 for 3. Who were the other gods that you, or 2 for 5, excuse me? Who were the other gods that you ended up losing to?
Well, by process of elimination, that leaves you Mango, Armada, and H-Box. And I was only able to get a game off of Mango. He's the one of the 3 that I've beaten the most. I haven't taken a game off Armada in tournament. I've only beaten H-Box once, and it was a very close 2-1. So, yeah, statistically speaking, it pretty much all stacks up. Peach, Puff, and Fox are all particularly difficult matchups for the Ice Climbers. Like, they've got a lot of exploitable weaknesses. These guys are super good. I can be inconsistent, but the one thing I have on my side against players like that is I tend to be very unpredictable and wacky, right? I do lots of weird stuff. I throw absolutely everything at you during a set, and I see how much you panic. So that helps a lot when I'm trying to face these really strong players, because so much of your skill is based on experience and training that when you get taken out of your comfort zone, sometimes even an expert can look, like a novice if you catch them flat-footed. So that's a lot of what I try to do, and it's pretty difficult against these really strong players to do that, especially over time, as they get used to playing. Like, how much new things can you invent? How many, rather? And at some point, you've just got to be able to outplay them on a moment-to-moment basis, which is really tough against these
gods.
Gods, Titans. Mewtwo King doesn't have as much experience against Ices. He really doesn't like the matchup, and PPMD hasn't been in the scene. Plus, he was getting really tired out by the end of the day, so like you could kind of tell in his play. I don't feel like I beat his true form, so to speak.
Right.
So I'm not going to hate on the performance. I just know that 2 for 5 is pretty good, considering the tournament was named after them and it got me 4th place. But
yeah, definitely, and
yeah,
it was cool. Yeah, I mean, it was cool to find and just see that the name of the tournament kind of also defined your event itself, and it was definitely something interesting to see. But stepping away from the gods of the game and going back to the match against Westballz, I saw that Westballz had actually recently beat you at a tournament in Sweden not long before this event. When you ended up beating Westballz, was there some sort of gratification that came from just being able to get that sort of revenge so quickly?
Well, Westballz and I have played quite a bit. He's very well-traveled player, right? So he's kind of like Mewtwo King in the sense that if there's like a mid-level big tourney in some random state, he might just be there. Because he was playing for Tempo Storm at the time, and they just flew him everywhere. So I had played him in Texas a couple times. I'd played him out in Arizona. I'd played him in California. Have I played him in Vegas? I don't think I did. Yeah, I've played him everywhere. So playing him in Sweden, the reason that set was so frustrating for me is because I was feeling amazing that day. I had actually gone and done some sightseeing in Sweden for a week before the tourney, so I was fully adjusted to the time zone. I was rested. I was ready. Right before our set, I had just come off playing Ghetto, and he's a really high-level European player. We had a tight 3-2. It was a really, really good set, really down to the wire. The nerves kind of came down. I felt really nice and calm. got into my set against Westballz, and I just played awful. Not I'm not putting him down or anything. Like, he looked at me like, dude, what was that?
Wow, that's
not to be insulting. I was just like falling off the level and dying. So, yeah, I didn't understand why. I came to the conclusion that I was kind of messing with my energy and like muscle tension by drinking caffeine during tournaments. I did a little reading. Caffeine can impact your motor skills. You know, it can increase tension. This should be obvious, but I'm just so used to having it that I didn't think about it. And I had a cup of coffee like 30 minutes before the match, so I felt great, but I played bad. This tournament, Battle of the Five Gods, was one of the first ones where I'd resolved to avoid caffeine during the event. I would have like tea in the morning, and then if I needed caffeine, like if I started having a caffeine headache or I got really tired, I'd have a bit, but I'd make sure it was at least 2 hours before the set. So yeah, this tournament was kind of experimental for me in that regard, and I played really well against Westballz during this set. So I knew it wasn't like a personal thing. He's also very aggressive, doesn't give you a lot of room to breathe, so he's very difficult in that regard. He's also very flashy, and you know, some people say I'm flashy, and some people say I'm really boring because they hate my character. But it was cool pulling off something like that picture up there.
Yeah. So actually, just to reference the picture, what I did when I was choosing the moment, I was looking for what's called the decisive moment of the match. Decisive moment is a term that's usually used in photography that is the highlight or climax of a narrative. Do you think that I made a good decision? Would you consider this one of your highlights?
Okay. So I would consider it a highlight for me for the tournament, for sure. For the set, Game 3 probably had a more decisive moment, but it was not nearly as cool. I cheese him with something like wave dash down smash, wave dash forward smash, catch him out of his jump, kill him at 30 with Sopo, and I win the game and go up 2-1 off of just utter nonsense. So that was probably more deciding for the set. But this moment for the tournament and for me personally, it was a weird situation that I set up into a grab. That I turned the grab into a flashy finish when people were expecting me to do something boring. I did it under a pressure situation in a way that turned around a game that was kind of starting to come down to the wire. And so I had a bit of nerves, but I fought them off. I did something fun and flashy against a fun and flashy player in a tough situation. And I did it during this tough, strenuous tournament against a guy who had just wrecked me in Europe. So all of that together made it like probably my highlight moment of Battle of the Five Gods. So personally, decisive as heck.
Well, I'm glad I got to hit the nail on the head there. So to stick with the painting, I wanted to talk about the idea that it's named after home field advantage. And for anyone that doesn't know, typically in sports, there's statistics that show the teams playing at their home field or in their home area is the team that's more likely to come out as the victor. And then you yourself, in an interview with Even Matchup Gaming in 2014, you compared yourself to an away team when you were playing outside of Arizona, where you had went to school. How much of a factor do you think playing on your home field is in Melee?
So, when I say I feel like an away team most of the time, I haven't always been a very popular player, right? I play an uncommon character. I use an infinite's named after me, and I use it fairly frequently when I'm trying to, play very seriously and win, right? Because there's a lot of times where you play for fun, you do less than optimal stuff, you're having a good time, you're goofing around, the money's on the line, you want to win, you will do the strongest thing, even if it's not the most fun thing, right? So, So historically, when I've gone places, the crowd hasn't really been on my side because just, you know, I'm from a state that doesn't have a lot of players, not a lot of representation at these nationals, and not as popular, all that jazz. So a long time ago, I had to get used to blocking out the crowd cheering against me. And that takes a bit of mental effort. But if I get into the zone, I feel like I don't even hear it, right? Or I hear it, but it just feels like there's a disconnect between it and like my response. So when I actually have a crowd behind me, it usually surprises me. Sometimes it's even more distracting.
So
What? You're cheering for me? Don't you know anything? You're not supposed to like me. So when that happens, it is kind of interesting. It's fun. It's cool. It's like, yeah, I am cool. Thanks, man. I think some other things come into play with the home field advantage, though. Like I said, with the Sweden tournament, I had actually gotten there a week before and did sightseeing. I got used to it, time zone change, goofing around in airports, being tired, not having access to like the food you're accustomed to eating. I think for sports teams, they probably, I don't know if this is true or not, but it seems like they would probably practice more in their stadiums too. So they probably get, some kind of extra benefit from being in a familiar environment. They got more people cheering for them. They're less tired. I think all that adds up. In this case, I was in a different city, but I only had to drive a couple hours to get there. And meanwhile, Westballz had to fly in from California, right?
Right.
So time zone change, blah, blah, blah. I feel like I kind of had a lot on my side, so home field advantage definitely makes sense in that regard.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's kind of a point that is overlooked a little bit, the time zones, because, for example, someone as myself who's never changed time zones just for a tournament or just for a weekend, I don't really know what that would actually feel like and how to adjust to it. So I'm sure with practice it gets better, but it definitely seems like it would be a consistent factor in some of the placings for the top players.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for just having a nice, consistent routine. A lot of successful people will try and do the same kind of work at the same time of day. I was reading about, some people who like to write or do creative work in the morning. They feel they're most creative, they're most energized, they're most motivated. Then later on in the day, when they're drained, they want to do like busy work. And I feel as though maybe these kinds of variables might affect our tournament play and our performance in the game without us realizing it. We're accustomed to going over to a friend's house one day at 7 at night on a Saturday and playing until 1 in the morning, but then you're going to play in a tournament at 11 in the morning for your first matches. But that's really your 9 in the morning because you went to the East Coast, right?
Right.
So if I go from Arizona to the East Coast, then I'm looking at like a 2 or 3 hour time change. And so, my early morning is, I guess it's their afternoon. And so different time of day, different levels of energy, things like that, especially if I don't get much sleep, because then I get there, I'm excited to see people, I stay up late playing, I'm sleeping in a hotel, and there are people partying in the room next to you, all this stuff adds up, and being able to avoid that by like just going back to bed in your own apartment, for instance, really, really helps a lot.
Yeah. And so, you're actually a player that has that kind of reputation put on yourself that Texas Wobbles kind of performs a little bit better. Or the idea of you in Texas or Arizona, you can beat anyone. But as you said, it's probably a little bit of just the day. But I still wanted to do some research into this idea. So since your return from retirement, the brief retirement you went on from 2013 to the summer of 2014, I gathered up all of the tournaments that you had attended to that had at least 2 of the Melee It On Me top 20 players in the world and at least 100 entrances. So what I did is I averaged out all of your results in Texas and Arizona, which came out to 4.8. And outside of the two states, excluding the EVO 2014 Mario, your average is 28.8, which is a full 24 places difference.
Yeah.
A little bit different in a double elimination format, but that's very significant. Do these results surprise you? And
Nope.
no?
I mean, pretty much like with a line like 2 top 20 players, over 100 entrants. You know, we had a tournament, the Forte 3, and 2 of the big entrants were SFAT and Westballz, and I beat them. You know, awesome, right? Beat Westballz twice, beat SFAT once. Javi from Mexico was there. I didn't have to play him. I got a bit lucky in that regard because my friend Ty actually beat him in winner's bracket. So that's cool. Lucky me. Because Javi had beaten me 2-0 at a tournament before. So at that tourney, I only had to play 2 super good players in that regard over a 2-day tourney, and that one was also in Austin. Whereas at a big major, like a big one, you know, 500 people, and I might have to play several top 30 players in a row to get to top 8, rather than beat 2 to win. Lucky came to a Texas tourney, Dime, and I lost to him in winners finals, and then I barely won in losers finals, and then I won more convincingly in grands. I get time to figure him out. I don't have to spend as much time playing all these other people. I knew Lucky was coming, so I got to think more specifically about how I was going to beat him, rather than when I go to a big major where I go, I might have to prepare for the best Falcon, the best Peach, 5 of the 10 best Foxes, 2 amazing Falcos, a bunch of really good Marths, and so on and so forth, to get to top 8. And that's excluding, like, you know, random hidden bosses who just come out swinging on day 1 that make you work a lot harder and make you nervous. So on top of time zone change, on top of being in hotels, you know, if I'm at a tourney where I know everyone, I might just sit down and start practicing because I see them every other week. If I go to a big major, I might spend more time hanging out rather than warming up like I should. A lot of different stuff adds up, so it doesn't surprise me that my average placing, you know, goes down when I'm under these much different circumstances.
Right. And do you think, besides the caffeine, or disregarding the caffeine, is there anything else that you've done to try and counteract some of these issues, or is it just part of being a Smash player?
Well, trying to pay attention to the sort of food you eat is huge. We know that diet impacts energy, etc., but then you get out to a big tourney and you're running around, and we don't really think as much about how we're going to maintain a good diet. That comes into it. I love my crummy fast food, man. I've got a serious addiction. At Battle of the Five Gods, they actually catered it. We just had these nice sandwiches and fruit plates and stuff in the back.
Perfect.
You know? Yeah, and just bottles of water laying around everywhere. Did you want... Oh, we'll get you some OJ. Yeah, let's go get the players a case of OJ. And they come back with some Tropicana orange juice. It's like, this is sick. I'm not just sitting around drinking energy drinks that also cost $4 or $5 a piece because I'm at a convention center. I'm sitting back there and just eating, you know, nice stuff because they wanted to put on like a high quality event and take care of the players. So it was nice being able to just eat lightly, consistently, high quality food. That was cool. There were also all these setups back there for us to warm up on, so, you know, staying warmed up is big. You can't always do that at a big tourney because so many people have to play their matches, and so many people want to play each other. Yeah, trying to pay attention to what I eat had a big impact. I've also got I have a hand trimmer, right? Or just a general muscle trimmer. It's not huge, but when I get really nervous or when I get really hungry, it really starts to act up. And so I've also I try to come up with ways to counteract that. Usually one of them is by just having a lot of muscle tension in certain parts of my body so that I can kind of create like a physical anchor, so that, or I use really fast motions so the tremor can't come into play. So for this particular tournament, I was also thinking of things like really paying attention to the levels of relaxation and tension in my hands. What I felt was the level of adrenaline going through me. So am I amped up enough to focus? Okay, let's zone in, and then wait, too much, come back. Namaste. Get yourself centered, really trying to pay attention to all these factors is really tough. I think a good routine is huge. I think it's easier to stick to that routine when you're in your home state. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that so much tournament performance can be variable for so many players when you have all this stuff floating around. I don't know, man.
Oh, yes, it is. So I guess I guess it's kind of true then, and it's Texas Wobbles is scary. So the other thing I do want to talk about Battle of the Five Gods is, even though you had all of this behind the scenes going on, what we saw as viewers and what you saw when you were actually on the stage was a very interactive crowd. There were the mics going right to the crowd from the commentators, and the crowd was definitely very loud. I know that there was a lot of the commentators mentioning that you were their guy. Texas loves Wobbles. And so I just have a question that kind of compares your fans to the crowd, and how they might counteract each other and how they affect you as you play.
So I know what you're referencing, since we talked a bit before this, about, like, I feel a lot of pressure to live up to expectations. I have a lot of expectations on myself. I'm really demanding and critical of myself, and when I have fans that I think I'm going to let down if I do badly, that can put a lot of extra pressure on me that I didn't really have back at the day when I thought everyone just didn't like me. It was a lot easier back then. It's like, well, if I lose, nothing's changed. I haven't lost anything. There's only something to gain. But now it's, oh no, if I disappoint my fans, what if they stop tweeting at me? What if they stop wanting me to take pictures with them? What if they stop thinking I'm cool? Because it's nice to have people think you're cool. So worrying about stuff like that, you don't want to think about stuff like that while you're playing. It's not really the fans' fault. It's more, it's up to me to manage that. I can't imagine what it's like to be, a sports team where you get death threats because you fumble a ball or whatever. And these are from the people who wear your jersey, right? Up in the stands. So having fans it's awesome, but it's also can be very stressful. So when I have a crowd cheering for me, on the other hand, it feels more responsive, right? I did a cool thing. Whoa. That's a positive reinforcement. That's like, yeah, I'm doing good. When the fans have me kind of primed in advance to worry about losing, then the pressure starts to mount before the game is even kicked up. And again, it's, most of the stuff going on in your head is just, it's on you. The environment is just out there, and how you look at it changes how you are. So it's up to me to manage that and to think of fans as kind of like an ongoing positive reinforcement, to see them as people who are in my corner and support me rather than people that I may or may not be letting down. That's on me. But it does create that different feeling. It's an extra factor for me to manage, especially given how self-critical I can be.
Right, that's very interesting, and I guess it kind of just adds to what you had talked about with the Texas and Arizona fans. So it's definitely a interesting perspective. So what I'm going to do now is I am just going to circle back to the painting here. And so as I said thank you. As I said in the intro, you are the main character of the painting, and also you're the protagonist. Do you at all relate the idea of being a protagonist to that fan, the negative aspect of the fans, and not wanting to let them down? And how would that compare to your reaction of being the antagonist for, let's say, Westballz fans in this case?
I'm definitely an antagonist for other people's fans. Just look at the YouTube comments, or don't, because they aren't nice. I was an English major long time ago. Now I'm in a different one. But I remember when you're studying stories, who you view the story from the perspective of really changes, your opinion of the story. You're more likely to side even with a villain as long as you get to see things from their head. And when you're playing the game, you're thinking about it from your perspective. Actually, I brought this up in a commentary thread. When commentators are kind of discussing a match as though it's from the perspective of one player, it tilts the whole view of the match to think this person needs to win. They're the hero, right? And if you're cheering for the other guy and they're barely talking about them, or they're being talked about like they're the antagonist, that really stinks if you're their fan, right? Like, no, I'm a Mewtwo King fan. Talk about how Mewtwo King's going to win. Stop talking about how None from Canada is going to win. Talk about Mewtwo King. What does he need to do? Talk about him. He's my protagonist. He's my hero. When you're playing and you're thinking about it too much from your own perspective, though, it does make you forget the other person.
I think I know where you're going, and I believe it was in a different interview that you had actually brought up that idea of the commentary. I'll make sure to link that in the comments for anyone interested, but I think that's definitely kind of circles around that idea of the protagonist and antagonist. And then I also wanted to bring up, you had a blog post not too long ago titled Frame of Mind. And in the post, you brought up the idea of removing the protagonist and antagonist idea when you're actually playing. And so you're treating the match between your opponent and yourself as a lesson for each party.
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind, I was wondering how you would try and display a narrative without the protagonist or antagonist. And we can use my painting as an example. If you could change how I painted it so it fit into your guidelines, how do you think you would do it?
So in the painting up there, you can kind of see how it's centered on the main climber. So that just naturally puts them at the center of your focus. And there are actually some psych studies showing that whatever you're paying attention to, you're more likely to view as the cause of something, even if it's not. So like if you're watching an interview where two people talk evenly, but the camera is focused on one of them, they look like they dominate the conversation. So in this case, it looks like I dominate the painting because, quite honestly, from a perspective, I do. I'm right in the middle. It's centered on me. I'm also bashing Fox with a hammer. That's pretty rough. If you want to make it look less like I'm the hero or the protagonist of the picture, then, you probably change the arrangement so that it was more evenly dispersed between me and the other guy. So maybe lift the frame up a bit so that I'm in one corner, Fox is in the other, or we're both kind of close to the center, but the center is empty space. And from a color and composition perspective, you might continue tilting the camera so that it looks like aesthetically pleasing to do that. Not being the artist, man, I'm not 100% sure how to do that, but yeah, making sure that the two characters are equally close to the center, so it looks like you can kind of pick who you want to be the hero just by shifting your focus. Whereas for this one, if you look up at Fox, it's very clear he's the secondary element, and the focus is on me. I think that's not always healthy in a competition, because the other person wants to win as bad as you do. I'm going to pray to God so my sports team wins, and then the other team's going to pray to God, and now God has to pick who prayed better. You're both trying to win, you're both trying to improve, and viewing yourself as the protagonist too hard can kind of blind you to what the other person is thinking, and funnily enough, get into their head so that you can destroy them. And in this case, just by focusing on me, it's like, oh yeah, this is awesome for Wobbles. And then Westballz was up there like, what about me? And then he flies away. And yeah, it's interesting how that plays out when you're competing. In the picture, it's very obvious like who you're supposed to be cheering for in this case, you know.
Well, I'm definitely really glad to hear that. I could go on with a long list of artistic terms that I had in mind when I was making the composition, but just in general, I'm just really glad that you did pick up on that. And the only other thing that I just wanted to make a joke about is when we were talking beforehand, you mentioned that changing the perspective could also just be changing the title. So if, for example, if I had just changed the title to, oh no, everything is horrible, you're probably going to think that we're actually in the perspective of Fox. Although I would need the change of frame, which I should be able to include in this video. I think the title is also very important, but that's just something about my own practice, I think. So I think that's actually going to wrap up all of I have to say and all of the questions I have for you. I'd like to thank you very much for spending some time with me, and thanks for responding when you did and just answering to me reaching out. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, you made a pretty awesome piece of art, and I'm not just saying that because I'm in it. Well, maybe I am. I don't know.
Wait until you see it up close to say that. But
it feels cool to be reached out to, and to know that when people watch me play and compete, it makes them want to do stuff of their own. It's kind of a pay it forward effect, and it's really awesome. So thank you for making the painting and having me.
Yeah, of course. And is there any shout-outs you want to do? Just
honestly, shout-outs to content creators, people who make things and share them. So things like this painting, or things like videos and interviews, and things that let me talk a lot, and things that let people connect and communicate. Because if it weren't for that, I would just be playing video games in my room probably. So there you go.
All right, so thanks again. And just for everyone watching, this is the beginning of a series that I'm going to be starting, and there's going to be more paintings on the way. And if you like that, just stick around and take a look at my Twitter, which will be in the link in the description, and my channel I'll keep you all updated. So thanks for everyone for tuning in. Hey guys, Soda here. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I just wanted to give a last minute shout out to ege.gg and OntarioSmashgg. I wanted to thank them for everything they've done for me and for what they've done for the Ontario Smash communities. And just while I've got you here, I wanted to let you know I know this video ran a little bit long, and in the future I will be keeping the interviews shorter. And I'd also just appreciate any sort of constructive criticism you have for me, and you can reach me in the comments or on my Twitter. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.